Hello, driven dietitians. I am so excited for this mini training because have gotten this request, so many questions about this topic in Facebook groups, Instagram messages, emails for my newsletter, all the things. And I think it's time for this mini training to happen. So if you are a dietitian who works for a large group practice or a telehealth platform and you're seeing clients for somebody else and you're doing what you would basically be doing if you ran your own business, except for they're doing the insurance contract client portion for you. If this is you and you are thinking, I could make so much more money and have so much more time seeing less people, but more money if I did this for myself. If this is you, keep watching. And if you feel overwhelmed by the prospect of getting your own insurance contracts, but you've been throwing around the idea for a while and you just want to make more money, work less hours, have more flexibility, see the clients that you want, then this mini training is for you. So grab your notebook, let's dive in. These are the top 3 mistakes I see private practice owners making when they are trying to launch into their own private practice while also working for a group telehealth practice. Because I get it, I have been there. I worked for a group telehealth practice when I started my private practice, and it was just a side hustle. So I worked for this private practice, group practice, while building my own. And so I know exactly what it's like to feel worried about, how do I ensure that I'm not doing anything wrong? How do I ensure I'm getting paid for my own clients? How do I ensure that I'm building my own practice and doing things by the books? And let me first start by saying, yes, you need to make sure there's no non-compete. But from my understanding, that's not really a problem because in the United States, it's actually not legal to have non-competes. But you do need to do things ethically that feel good to you. So that's my first thing. But here are the top 3 things of mistakes that I see these private practice dietitians making. Because like I said, I've had so many conversations with you all on this topic. So the number 1 thing that I see is not getting an NPI 2 before contracting. So if you work for a group telehealth practice, you most likely have an NPI 1. And you most likely redeemed that yourself. You signed in and got your own NPI 1. But you probably did not get an NPI 2 because you didn't have your own business. So an NPI 2 is a group NPI. So this is a National Provider Identification Number. And it's for your group. So my practice is Live Well Dietitian, but I'm Emily Suker. So my NPI 2 is for Live Well Dietitian, and my NPI 1 is for Emily Suker. So this is a mistake that I personally made. I did not have an NPI 2, meaning that I had an NPI 1 that I was using for my own practice. But if I had an NPI 2, it would have made it a lot easier to transition out and to cover my bases to make sure that when I was filing claims for my own personal business, it was under my group, not just my personal, because my personal NPI was also connected to this group telehealth practice. So your NPI 1 is connected to this group practice and to you, but if you had your NPI 2 and your personal, it kind of gives you that extra layer to make sure that the claims you are submitting are under your group practice or your personal private practice, not the group practice. So I say that because now the NPI 2 I need to have because I have a group member. I have a team member, 1 team member who works for me currently. And so the biggest mistake that would have saved me a lot of frustration and just like overwhelm of like, oh my gosh, am I not getting paid what I deserve because I submitted, a claim to the wrong, NPI 1, or, just kind of gives that layer of extra accuracy and support. So if you are thinking about starting your private practice and you work for a group practice, get an NPI 2 in addition to your NPI 1. And I will attach another video here, more NPI, if you are a little bit confused or you don't remember getting your NPI 1. Because I know when you're starting a group practice, starting a new job, it's like there's just so much information. So the second thing, this is even more important than the first thing. I think I've heard horror stories about people who do not get their own tax ID and are just using their social, or when they submit the claim, because they have a contract through a group practice and their own, they submit it to the wrong tax ID. So your tax ID, which I will kind of break that down a little bit. So your tax ID is going to be, basically it's your social security number for your business. And this number is going to be associated with all of your insurance contracts. So before you even get your insurance contracts, you're going to need to get this specific tax ID. So things I have heard that have happened from dietitians I have worked with and interacted with is a big oopsie that happened is when they go to submit a claim, they accidentally didn't check the tax ID that they were submitting the claim under. So instead of submitting it through their personal tax ID, for me, for example, if I didn't submit it under my Live Well Dietitian tax ID, instead I submitted it under the group practice I was working for, then the money, the reimbursement that I got from that session that I had with a client wouldn't go to me, it would go to them, meaning that the wrong person is getting paid. So the second thing is the biggest mistake is not double checking that you are submitting using your correct tax ID number. We don't need to make that mistake. We don't need to worry about it. That's never personally happened to me, but I've heard of it happening. And so that's a big mistake that we do not want happening. And so just checking and making sure when you are submitting claims. Once you get your claim submission process mastered and repeatable, you're not going to have to worry and check every time. But when you're first starting, this is really important to double check and verify. Okay, we're on to the third thing. So the third thing is all about CAQH. And I'm sure if you are working for a group telehealth practice, you have established a CAQH profile. And if you haven't and they're completely controlling it, that should not be happening. You should be in charge of your CAQH. But basically, I'll attach a video here on how your CAQH, what you keep under it. It keeps your licensors. It helps basically connect your personal information, your licensure information to the insurance companies. That way it's all in one place. So the CAQH, the biggest thing that I am seeing happening with individuals, dietitians who work for group practices and their personal private practice, they are not making their personal private practice the main practice. They're having the access be the main practice of the group practice. When you have your own private practice, you are the main practice. You are the main person in charge of this CAQH. You are the main contact, the main email, and you want to make sure that you have that access. So if you go into your CAQH, you want to ensure that all the information is accurate, that you are the main contact, you are the primary practice that is under the CAQH. Because it's your account, it's your information, so you are the main person they should be in contact with. You are the main practice that it needs to be under. So the big mistake I'm seeing is individuals just going in, attesting their CAQH because they had an email saying they needed to, but they're not actually looking at that information. This is legally binding. You need to ensure you are attesting correct information, and you need to make sure that you are the one who has access to this account because it is your information and you are attesting as you. So if someone else does it for you, that's not you attesting, but it says you're attesting. So you need to be in control of that, and you need to make sure you're primary contact as well as the primary practice. And I have a little bonus mistake. So we talked about getting an NPI-2. We talked about not double checking if claims are being submitted to the correct tax ID. And we talked about making sure you are attesting correct information on the CAQH. But the last thing I want to share, the big mistake that I see dietitians who work for group practices making is looking for someone to get them contracts with insurance and file their claims for them versus doing it themselves, learning to do it themselves. And the reason why these dietitians are not as successful that have someone just do this for them is they're not actually learning the process, meaning every time they want to get contract with a new insurance company, they have to pay someone money to do this. They have to pay someone to do this. But really, it's not that hard if you learn how to do it, if you learn the process. The same with filing claims. And I'm not saying you can't have, a virtual assistant or someone support you in filing claims, but if you don't learn how to do it first, then you're going to be reliant on this person to do it for you forever. And if you're leaving a group telehealth company because you want to make more money and have more freedom and flexibility around your income and time, you need to learn to do it first. Because if you know how to do it, you can train someone to do it. If, say, your virtual assistant quits or the company starts charging, 40% of your income, what's the point of doing your own thing and making more money and having more freedom and flexibility if you're really not making more money? So that's a bonus one. I encourage you to learn to do it yourself, because in the long run, that's going to save you money, time, confidence, the mental load of everything. You're going to feel like, oh, it's actually not as hard as I make it out to be in my brain if you just learn to do it. But that's the thing. You don't have to learn to do it alone. And so I felt so overwhelmed trying to learn to create my own practice. So I created a academy, extreme masterclass of the step-by-step guidelines on what I wish I knew when I started my private practice with insurance. So walking you through the very, very first step of establishing your tax ID, establishing your MPI-2, how to make sure your CAQH is set up correctly, how to get your first insurance contract, all the back-end information you need before you do that, as well as how to submit claims easily, seamlessly, and time efficiently, as well as checking benefits, bringing in your first clients, all the things we could list it off. But if you are thinking, I have a group practice or I work for a group practice and I want to have my own practice so I can make more money, have more freedom, have more flexibility, work with clients I actually want to serve, then Insurance Mastery Academy is something I encourage you to look into. Send me a DM on Instagram or an email, and let's chat about if it's a good fit for you specifically, because you can start your own private practice while working for a group practice. And you can do so in a time efficient way. So that way in a year, you could be independent on your own private practice, maybe even less depending on how fast and how much time you have to put into it. That's what happened for me. Within a year and a few months, I leapt into my full-time job as a private practice owner, and now I have a team member and I love it.